And we're back with another episode of On the Record with Tiffany, and I have the pleasure of having the Honorable Joe Gonzales here to talk to us about what's going on with the District Attorney's Office and all the new work that they're doing amid this pandemic. How are you doing, Mr. Gonzales, Honorable Mr. Gonzales?
Good afternoon. Happy New Year.
Same to you.
I hope you had a nice holiday season as well as you could have under these circumstances.
That's right. You look great.
Well, thank
And
you.
and you guys have been doing some amazing work considering what we're dealing with in terms of, I mean, you've had you took this job in 2019 with no idea that we were going to experience a pandemic, an insurrection, um the worst healthcare epidemics exposed along with the pandemic, civil unrest. Like, it's been a pretty unprecedented. Any one of those things would be kind of a game changer for a district attorney. you know.
It has been quite
Uh,
a challenge. You're right.
so tell us how COVID-19 has impacted you doing your work and the efficacy of your office.
Okay. Well, let me begin by saying you're right. When I ran for this office, expected to handle the typical responsibilities of a district attorney in a large
Mm-hmm.
metropolitan county. Uh, we run an office of over 500 employees, and I expected to deal with the typical administrative headaches that you deal with in an office this large. But never in my wildest dreams did I ever imagine having to deal with a worldwide pandemic and how it was going to affect what we do in this county. And it has certainly had a profound, impact on the criminal justice system in Bexar County. But I will tell you that we've done, I believe, a really good job at trying to continue to move the wheels of justice, to try and do the best we can under the circumstances. One of the first things I did is recognize back in March of 2020, almost a year now, that
Mm-hmm.
this was coming. And so what I did is go to a workforce of 20% in person and 80% work from home. Fortunately, most of our employees have laptops that they could have taken home with them and continue to review cases, continue to have Zoom hearings where um, we can conduct business. But the large part of what we normally do didn't occur because again we were trying to keep people from contracting COVID. We were trying to keep the amount of people that were in our buildings to a minimum. So it has had an impact on our daily operations. But remember, we're only a part of this whole cog. Along with us is law enforcement and the courts. That is to say, the clerks, the bailiffs, the judges themselves, everybody that works together to move these cases along. They've all been impacted by COVID. And so we have all been trying to work together at doing the best we can under these circumstances. Typically in any one year, we handle 60,000 cases per year. That's been no different this year. We continue to have to handle those kinds of cases. There's been somewhat of a reduction just because of the activity on the street, as it were, may
Mm-hmm.
have been reduced, especially during those times when we were locked down, when there wasn't a lot of activity. But we continue to work these cases. One of the things that we continue to have to do is run the magistrate's office. When someone commits a crime and an officer makes a decision to make an arrest, he's got to take that person to the magistrate's office, and that division has to be manned by a prosecutor to review those cases to determine if there's probable cause to charge that person with a crime. So we've had to continue to operate even under COVID. We've had prosecutors work. We have a 24-hour magistration system. So a lot of times when we're all asleep or enjoying our family on the weekends, we have a prosecutor continually working over there, processing these cases. We've done it with social distancing. Everybody in my office wears masks. We sanitize our hands. We do everything that we have to, but we have to continue to operate that division. Other divisions like the Family Justice Center that handles the protective orders. Again, what happened during COVID is that we knew that a lot of the victims of domestic violence were having to shelter in place with their abusers. And
Mm-hmm.
we knew that at some point they're going to have to come out of the shadows and file cases against their abusers. Again, we have continued to run that office. We now have an online system where someone can actually apply for a protective order online. That has helped alleviate those issues for the victims that are seeking protective orders, but it's ballooned the amount of work that we have. And there are other divisions, like for example, we have a section of scanners. When a police report is prepared, it's until recently was all handwritten. So we had to have people scan those into our systems so they can be uploaded and then reviewed ultimately by lawyers that are preparing for trial. So all that has been occurring this whole time. One of the most frustrating things, again, because of COVID, is the reality that we do not have jury trials. We haven't had jury trials since last March or April, a year ago. And the
So what
administrative,
does that mean
that
for?
means that the cases are stagnating, because if you are accused of a crime and you insist um, on your day in court, if you believe that you want to go to trial, if someone's accusing you of crime and you obviously have a constitutional right to fight that case and you want to go to trial, then you have to wait until we have jury trials or people coming from the community to be impaneled so that we can select people to sit on a jury trial. Because most cases, we would have to agree to waive a jury and have that case decided by a judge. And so in those circumstances where we need a jury panel and people are not coming into the community, we can't select a jury because we don't have a pool of
Mhm.
potential jurors. So that's been the case for almost a year now. The
What's the
that
fix for
situation,
that?
I'm sorry?
If what is the how do you address that if we continue on for another 6 months,
Well,
a year where we can't?
that's the problem. I don't know if you have been made aware, but from time to time, the administrative judge will report to the community.
Mhm.
There have been several reports where Judge Rangel has said he's not going to expose the community. He's not going to expose potential jurors to COVID
Oh,
unless
right. Yes.
the positivity rate is
Mhm.
so low that he feels comfortable in asking potential jurors to come downtown. So what happens, to answer your question, Tiffany, is that
Mhm.
those cases continue to build up. We now have a backlog of cases that are waiting trial. For example, just on the in custody side, the people that are waiting to go to trial uh, from March of last year to now, there are some 1,600 people that are
Wow.
sitting in the Bexar County Jail awaiting to go to trial. And obviously, that's an issue that we're all going to have to resolve at some point. And that's just those people that are sitting in jail. There's a lot more people that are out on bond that again are waiting for their day in court. So until and unless we can get to a point where we can start moving these cases, they're going to continue to build up.
Are there some options on how you can move those cases? Are there things you're trying to put forward that maybe haven't gotten the traction you wanted?
Sure. Well, there are some, we certainly should be and we have been trying to think outside the box. And one of those is, as I've mentioned before, if we think a case is appropriate for waiving a jury trial, we can certainly approach the defense attorney who represents the accused and ask if this is something that his or her client may be willing to agree to waive a jury and have the case decided by the judge. We've actually done that on a couple of cases already. We've had a number of cases that, for example, have been heard by some of our domestic violence courts judges. And they can certainly make the decision about whether or not a defendant is guilty of a crime. So in that way, we might be able to move those cases. Again, I've instructed our staff to look at those cases, even the felony cases, where we believe it would be appropriate to try the case in front of a judge. Keeping in mind that there are some cases that are not readily susceptible to that. Some cases that we believe should be decided by a jury of 12. But in those cases, let's say minor offenses, property crimes, maybe drug offenses, where you don't have a victim of crime, those may be right for those kinds of situations.
Could technology be used to conduct, to assemble a panel of 12, like they're doing with Congress and with the representatives?
So let me talk a little bit about the challenges that technology would present when talking about a trial situation. If you're talking about a typical trial, let's say it's a drug case that I mentioned, one of the things that a state's witness would have to do would be to bring the substance, the controlled substance, to court, and it has to be, in order to be introduced, it has to be labeled, and there are certain steps before it's admitted into evidence. For example, the witness would have to identify the drug. And then that piece of evidence then is presented to a judge. So it presents challenges if people are sitting at different locations. Not too long ago, we had a hearing in front of one of our state district judges where the issue was the identification of the defendant. The defendant was sitting at the Bexar County Jail. The judge was in the courtroom. The prosecutor was in another location. And so we had to manipulate that proceeding to be able to for example, offer the evidence. There was an issue about this individual had a prior criminal history. So the state's witness had to fingerprint that individual. He had to go down to the Bexar County Jail, fingerprint that individual, come back and testify that was the same individual. The defense attorney raised an interesting point. When our fingerprint examiner went down there to do it, the defendant had a mask on. And so the defense attorney asked, well, how do you know that my client is the same person that you fingerprinted earlier? This had happened the day before. Fortunately, our state's witness was quick enough to respond, well, I heard his voice. I recognize his physical features other than the area where he's got his mask. He was able to give sufficient enough description when the judge accepted the identification. But that's the challenge that it posed, because they were different parts of the trial, different people or players in the trial were at different locations. Another problem would be, for example, if we ever went to a jury trial via Zoom. Those are other challenges. For example, when we pick a jury, we ask the jury that's deliberating not to engage in independent investigations, not to look at other sources for information. Most jurors can't even take notes when they're sitting listening to a trial. So can you imagine a juror sitting at home? I've got the laptop here and I'm listening to the trial. What's to prevent that juror from having another computer where then they engage in some research on their own, to go on Google or some other platform to do the research about whatever they're listening to? What's to prevent somebody else from listening to the trial and trying to feed that information to the potential juror? You see how that would create problems.
Well, another problem would be the ability to actually tape people too in the state of Texas. So as long as one party knows that they're doing that, somebody outside of that juror could potentially be sitting on the other side of the camera doing exactly that.
Right.
So yeah, you pose a lot of interesting. Yeah. Oh man, talk about having to think through some weighty issues. So I just want to know, um, what does this mean for victims? When the we talked about the person who's being accused who's waiting, but the victim is waiting too. So what is this? What does that mean for victims, and how are y'all handling that?
Well, that is a real concern for me because we want to make sure that our victims of crime have some justice, right? And we don't want them to have to work. I'm sorry, we don't want them to have to wait forever. So what we're trying to do is keep in contact with our victims. We're trying to reach out to them and ask them to please be patient, that we're all in this boat together to try and get back to normal. But our hope is that they don't lose interest. Our hope is that they don't move away and decide, you know what, I've waited too long, you all waited too long, I'm not coming to court, because that would be a travesty of justice. Let's say, for example, because we mentioned it before, let's say a victim of domestic violence. Let's
Mm-hmm.
say the wife or the girlfriend or whoever is a victim and she's waiting to go to court and then loses interest or moves away and says, you know what, I'm just not interested in doing it. And by doing that, this perpetrator may commit another act on somebody else down the road.
Right.
We don't want that to happen. So it is a concern of ours. It is a challenge for us. And one of the things we're trying to do is again keep in contact with our victims of crime and ask them to please be patient with us. Please hold on, and we're going to get back to normal one day. We hope that it's sooner rather than later. But again, we're all in the same situation. The judges are frustrated. The
Mm-hmm.
defense lawyers with their clients are frustrated, and certainly we are because we want to bring justice to our victims. So
Well, I know you want to bring justice to your victims, and I know we just looking at what you've been doing in terms of another major problem that we have right now with the civil unrest. We've seen uh, civil rights. Like the last time we talked, it was right after George Floyd. I think we talked just a few weeks after that, and you know, it was a poignant moment and conversation because uh, you went through law school at a time when civil rights were really important. So a lot of your career and anyone can see the way that you've conducted yourself has been about achieving equity and giving everyone a fair shot. So since you've seen what's happened after that, what what were your thoughts? Because I see you are a man of action. So you went out and made some things happen, not just you saw this and then tell everybody what you created.
okay. Well, and thank you for that background. I'll tell you, some of your listeners who maybe didn't hear the first time.
Mm-hmm.
While I've been the district attorney for 2 years, I have been a lawyer for 32 years, for over 32
Mm-hmm.
years, and I certainly have seen my share of inequity. And I'm here to tell you, if you haven't heard it from other sources, we do have institutional racism in every facet of life, not
Mm-hmm.
only education and professional areas but in law enforcement, the courts as well. And so I certainly have seen it. I saw it as a defense lawyer. I've seen it as a prosecutor. And so the sooner we recognize that we have institutional racism, the sooner that we recognize that we have, in some areas, implicit bias, then the sooner we can do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things I sought to do, even before George Floyd, was to try to handle those cases where people um, had been involved in situations where there was a claim of excessive force on part of law
Mhm.
enforcement, or maybe an officer involved shooting. We want to make sure that we do everything we can to bring justice to those situations. One of the biggest arguments that I heard in the community um, after George Floyd was this notion that how can prosecutors possibly be fair and unbiased when they have such a close relationship with officers? When you think about it, with what we do day in and day out, we rely on law enforcement officers to make cases for us, right? There are witnesses. When we have a typical drug case, we have a typical whatever it is, criminal trespass, marijuana, we ask the officers to come to court to testify on part of the state of Texas. So how can we ask them to do that and at the same time be looking at potentially charging them with a crime? That makes a lot of sense to me. So what I did is requested funding for and received, and I'm forever indebted to the Commissioner's Court for giving us the funding to create an independent division that we have called the Civil Rights Division. That unit is now fully staffed. We just full staffed it about 2 weeks ago. Has two prosecutors, an investigator, and a victim's advocate. I'll tell you, I'm most proud of the people that have stepped up and volunteered to be part of that unit. It's led by Daryl Harris, who is a veteran prosecutor, and he actually was a chief in one of our divisions. Um, he volunteered to step up and take over this division to lead it because this is something that he believes in, and has done an incredible job so far. In just uh, 30 days that we've been in operation, he's already made a handful of crime scenes. That's one of the things that we're doing different that hadn't been done before. And again, in the 30 plus years that I've been a lawyer, and that's all I've ever handled is criminal work, either as
Mhm.
a prosecutor or defense attorney. I've never heard of prosecutors in this county going to crime scenes. We now do that. This division, when it's
Wow.
involving officer involved shootings, which are kind of a unique type of case to begin with, anytime an officer fires his weapon that results in the serious bodily injury or death of anyone, then if law enforcement notifies us, we will dispatch our unit to make the crime scene. Now, not to conduct an independent parallel investigation because that's law enforcement's job, but to monitor the case so that we know when a case occurs and we will monitor the progress. And then depending on how long it's been, we may reach out to law enforcement and ask them, where are you on this case? When can we expect it in our office? Can we help you with obtaining something, an autopsy report? Are you looking to get a hold of witness A or family member B? That kind of thing. So that's one of the new ways that we are handling these kinds of cases. We have gotten the cooperation of both the San Antonio Police Department and Bexar County Sheriff's Office. Both the sheriff and Chief McManus have been very good about notifying us when they have these kinds of shootings. We have 35 or so law enforcement agencies in the Bexar County area. So we're reaching out to the smaller agencies. We just had a situation I'm sure you're well aware of now, the Balcones Heights incident
Mhm.
uh, that involved that unfortunate shooting of the sergeant, who I hear is doing better now. We were dispatched to that crime scene, and so we're in that way trying to improve the way these sorts of cases are handled. Another way that we're handling these cases differently is when we get a case into our office that is filed by law enforcement, we're going to review these cases fully and not get involved in the administrative side. Because what happened before I even got to office is um, in the previous administration, whenever a case was filed in this office, a letter was sent out or a notification releasing the officer back to duty. We don't get involved in administrative process. We're not going to have anything to do with making a decision about whether or not the officer should go back to work. That's strictly something for the agency to make a decision on. What we're going to do is we're going to ensure that we have every piece of evidence, every piece of paper, every uh, piece of information before making a decision to present it to the grand jury. And by the way, that's another way that we're changing the way we're doing business is we're going to take everything that we have and present it to a grand jury for them to make the ultimate decision about whether to indict uh, the officer when there's an allegation that he committed a crime. And then the last way we're handling these cases is in the event, under the flag of transparency, in the event that a case results in a no bill. In other words, a grand jury decides not to indict that officer, we're going to disseminate a letter to the general public, and we will put it on our website so that the general public can review uh, the facts of that case. We're prohibited from talking about what happens in a grand jury proceeding. By very nature, they're confidential. But in that letter, we're going to explain the facts of the case so that the public as well as the family has a general idea of why perhaps a grand jury might have decided to no bill a case. So those are the kinds of examples of how we're doing uh, uh, or handling these kinds of cases differently than before.
That's a very innovative way to handle cases. Having an actual attorney show up and just assist with the crime scene, because one of the things we talked about last time was one of the best examples of law enforcement and district attorneys' offices and other helping agencies working together to uh, make the public safer and fuel trust from the public. And Camden, New Jersey was the example that we talked about. um, and that was at the height of people saying defund the police. It was the big defund the police uh, tagline, I would say. Uh, but what actually happened in Camden, New Jersey, is that you had funding flowing in to help the police in the sense that there are so many mental health cases that you all are dispatched, that the police officers are dispatched to, and then it subsequently end up on your desk because there hasn't historically been a way to deal with that. You're sending someone who is trained with one set of values to go and handle a mental health case, and that requires another set of skills that are not, that these two don't match. So um, I like that you have the civil rights division, because that kind of working together is exactly what needs to happen for law enforcement to be effective and for the district attorney's office to be effective, for everybody to come out with, and for the victim and the accused to receive what they need to receive. And so
Right.
everybody comes out with the best possible outcome.
One of the biggest challenges, Tiffany, that I've encountered during this whole incident post George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement is the misconception that people have that prosecutors and cops, police are one and the same. We are not one and the same.
Right.
Uh,
That's different
uh,
offices,
right.
different things are happening.
Right. I don't have any control over how officers investigate or what they do when
Right.
they show up to scene. I can't order SAPD or Bexar County Sheriff to make an arrest. Likewise, they can't order me or direct me whether to accept your case or not. We have to make
Mhm.
decisions up here as lawyers. I say up here, away from the street is what I'm saying.
Mhm.
And we have to review a case like a lawyer reviews anything to determine whether or not a crime occurred.
Which is
And
very different. That standard is different from on the street
yes,
as a
ma'am.
police officer.
Right.
Can you explain a little bit to our listeners? Because I think there's a disconnect in what the average person understands about the burden of proof in a court of law. That's different.
Sure. And most times when officers are dispatched to a crime scene, they may find a victim of crime, again, domestic violence. Maybe you have a murder case where you have a dead body. Maybe you have a sexual assault case. And oftentimes, officers are given information and they develop suspects. So and for example, in a situation where they may have the suspect in custody, they have to make a decision about whether or not there is probable cause to believe that a crime occurred, probable cause to believe that that person they have in custody committed the sexual assault, the murder, the robbery, whatever it is that they're dealing with. Then they may make the arrest. At that point, then they bring that person to the magistrate's office. Our prosecutor reviews a case again to determine whether it's probable cause to believe that person committed the crime. And then later, when we get the case in our office, we have to look at those cases with an eye toward whether or not we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt, because that's the
Mm-hmm.
standard in Texas, as in most areas in this country, is can you prove, in fact, I think in all jurisdictions in this country,
Mm-hmm.
can you
Mm-hmm.
prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this person committed a crime? And so ultimately, that's what we have to look at. And a lot of times, it's not till the dust settles and until we talk to witnesses in preparation for trial and we review the physical and ballistics, autopsy report, witness statements, if there are any, DNA, then we make the decision whether or not we can go forward. And sometimes, if we don't have sufficient evidence, then we may make a decision to have to either dismiss a case or offer a what's called a plea bargain, where we
Mm-hmm.
might not had we had a strong enough case. So you're right, there are two different standards, and it's not until we start preparing for trial do we learn whether or not we have enough evidence to obtain a conviction.
And that, that brings me to that Camden, New Jersey example. The Camden, New Jersey had the same problem that we saw all over, highlighted in different places in the United States, that there was definitely a bias among some of the police officers against black and brown people. And so they decided to reimagine what policing would look like and what the district
Lost
attorney's
you.
office would do, and what each one of the governing bodies and authorities would do. And when they did, we saw a big change in how the public related to police officers, and therefore when officers showed up to a scene or were dispatched to a scene, they had already built a relationship with that community. And so instead of showing up to a scene and everybody's afraid to say anything, there's trust there. So now we're years into this, uh, and we see that the very things that you're doing right now, years from now, and as we build trust with our people on the law enforcement side and on the district attorney side, because you guys working with them, that what in this manner is going to be, it's a huge game changer
Mhm.
for for our city and for how we communicate with the disenfranchised in our community.
And you bring up that interesting that so that situation in Camden, it was unique in the sense that a decision was made that that department was so troubled and had so many problems that they disbanded that entire department and they rebuilt it from scratch. One of the things that they learned was that they needed to build a component of community policing, which is what you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about,
Mm-hmm.
where they actually had policemen go into the neighborhoods
And
and
getting
have
to know the
interaction.
community, getting to
Absolutely
know the community.
right,
I mean, they didn't defund the police; they reimagined them.
right,
And messaging is very important. It's important for both sides.
right.
It's important to have the police officers that are doing all the things they should be doing, treated like they're the heroes that they are, and it's important to take the guys that and ladies that should not be there and realize that, or need to be retrained and realize that.
That phrase is kind of one of these emotional phrases where it can be a gotcha moment because I have been asked point blank, "Are you for or against defunding the police?" And I would say, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! It's not that easy.
It's, yeah, it's not. It's not neat.
If you're talking about disbanding an entire police department, defunding them, I'm not a proponent of that." Can you imagine? Again, remember what I mentioned a minute ago. What if you didn't have enough police to cover an investigation of a sexual assault or a murder? We need police
Yeah, you
officers.
have to have.
We need to keep our community safe. If you're talking when you refer to defunding is as you say reimagining, redirecting resources to areas like mental health, then I'm all for that. But we
And
have to.
adding we really need to be adding resources for areas like mental health. It's not that funding needs to be taken away. We need to add funding for neighborhoods and communities that need that mental health training and that need those mental health professionals to show up and help in the areas that they need help. It's not a which is a great idea, uh, that we would work together and not have so many authority figures that are compartmentalized. One group is here, one group is there. That never do the twine meet. You don't want that. You want everybody to be working together for the good of the community, not in separate silos. So I love that. I love the civil rights division because that sounds like, your first steps in this are unifying. They're
And one of the
unifying
things.
steps.
Thank you for saying that, Tiffany. And it is something that we believe that is going to be beneficial to the community at large, but also to the family members uh, that are left behind in a shooting situation. And one of again, the differences in the way we approach these cases from before is the fact that our division is going to try and reach out to those family members as soon as possible to say, we're here. We're here to make contact with you as soon as we can to let you know the progress of the case. We will let you know when we get the case in our office. Again, because one of the biggest criticisms of one of the cases everybody now is well aware of is that the family was not notified of any decision the DA's office made until months, maybe even years later. Uh, Hopefully, by having our division reach out to those family members, that'll kind of help with the healing process.
Mhm.
And so that's one of the things that we hope to do with this new division.
There's better communication. And you
Yes.
can never you can never have too much communication. Better communication is key, especially when you're dealing with loved ones and the most precious commodities that we have. People need to hear from us.
Yeah.
They need to hear from those trusted authority figures. I want to ask you about, like, I was looking at how you're doing this. I guess that West Point background is I I have a West Pointer in the family.
Okay.
I was referred to as my younger sister. My little cousin she's my cousin that was like raised in and out of our house and my grandmother's house, and she's a West Pointer, so I know the
Now
they get down to the nitty gritty, right, real granular, and get things done.
uh, let's make sure our viewers know we're talking about the leader in the Civil Rights Division, not me. Daryl's the one that went to West Point.
That's right. That's right. We're talking about Daryl.
I
We're
don't think they would
talking
have
about
rather
you,
that be
Daryl. You
here.
got to come on the show. We're talking about you. But wow, I'm impressed with what you all have been able to accomplish, because this has only been around since October 2020.
Well, that's when we had the funding. That's
You
when we
got
got
the
it
funding.
approved. It took us over the holidays to interview, and the incredible thing is, so we publicized for these positions, and we accepted applications, and we interviewed people from far and wide, people outside the county, and who would have thunk that the best person was someone that I had in my own backyard, someone that was ideal to lead this unit, someone that stepped up and said, "I'm your man. I'm willing to do whatever it takes," and he's done an incredible job. And so we're real happy to have him lead this division. And like I said, and it's like you say, I mean, these are very emotionally packed situations. Someone has either been seriously injured or killed,
Mhm.
and nothing that you say is going to bring that person back, and nothing that you say is going to make the family feel better, except to know that we're going to try and do everything we can to do the right thing, that we're going to try and bring justice to that family.
And it's always helpful when people see a diverse group that's actually doing this, and they're not, you know, it can definitely feel like you're being singled out when you don't see anybody that looks like you in leadership. So I like the fact that we have a civil rights division with people of color in it, because often what I see, like within my day job, I have that other hat for Texas Kidney Foundation that I wear. Uh, I can't tell you how many diversity committees I've been asked to, hey, come over and talk to this diversity committee, and you get there and it's like the only diversity is that there are some women on the committee. And that's it. There are no people of color there. And you're just like, well, how are you making decisions about what is happening in communities that are you know black and brown and uh, Asian, and you don't have anybody representative of any of these groups in on the committee that's making the decisions. So that the you, your commitment to this is evidenced by how you set the group up from the beginning.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, saying that. And let me mention, just in case your viewers don't know what you might know. So we have four members in that community. I wanted to reflect the racial makeup of Bexar County. So we have the lead prosecutor is African American. We have a white American who's the third chair prosecutor. We have a Hispanic American who's the investigator, and a Hispanic American who's the paralegal or victims advocate. So I wanted to be as diverse as possible, and yet, um, you know, put the people in there that were qualified to do that job.
You
So,
don't get more qualified than West Point.
right,
I mean, you can't. When you take a look at the body of work and achievement of the group of all four of them, then one, it makes you proud to be a San Antonian, that we have this, that we put something together like this, uh, and then two, I'm looking forward to seeing what they're going to do, because no, with all of those different perspectives, the beauty in having people from so many different backgrounds is that each one comes to the table with a very different perspective and very different experiences. And that in and of itself helps you to create the best outcome, the best system. Think about different roads and paths that can be taken for our community. That I just love that, because we've got to do better than we've been doing for the last 4 years. The division that we see amongst people uh, is sad, because that's not who we are as Americans. And I feel like San Antonio is once again stepping up to show what can be done
Yeah.
within the footprint of what we of our our laws and opportunities. What can we do? What can we do to serve the public? Because we've got to get the focus back onto the fact that these are public servants. And if 10% of the people are doing wrong, that means 90% are doing the right thing. So let's appeal to the 90%. It's like I'm very thankful to you for what you're doing with the Civil Rights Division. I wanted to take the time to talk about your proposed cite and release expansion.
Okay.
Can you tell us about how that's been going?
Sure. Well, first of all, we in now about a year and a half of having the cite and release program in our office, it has resulted in a huge success. And I measure success. But first, let me say this again to our viewers that may not understand what cite and release is about. Whenever
Mhm,
an officer encounters someone on the street, whether it's a traffic stop or walking up to an individual, and the person may have committed the crime of, let's say, possession of misdemeanor marijuana, he's got the ability to arrest that person and process them, take them into custody, book them, the whole 9 yards. Sometimes it takes an entire shift. And so the question is that the best use of resources when you have just a certain amount of members of law enforcement, right? You only have so many police officers
mhm,
per city or county. And then you have a certain amount of prosecutors that have to review those cases. Is it the best use of our money? Is it the best use of our resources to spend all that time arresting someone for a misdemeanor amount of marijuana or for
mhm,
some other nonviolent offense? So cite and release allows the officer to have the discretion to, instead of arresting that person, give that person a citation, have them appear later to either conduct some community service or do some kind of a
mhm,
program, anger management, or drug awareness, or whatever the issue
mhm,
is. And in that way, they avoid a conviction, avoid having to bond out. But it also saves the county money. And so
mhm,
in a year and a half or so that we've been in operation, 3,500 people have avoided being arrested for nonviolent offenses. That's largely possession of marijuana cases, misdemeanor
mhm,
marijuana cases, that they would have come to court and gotten some sort of probation anyway. A lot of
mhm,
them would have gotten deferred adjudication, which is the kind of probation that doesn't result in a conviction. So
mhm,
why waste all that time and money to give them upfront what they would have ultimately gotten at the end, the back end, right? And
mhm,
so because of that, uh, 3,500 people have avoided being arrested, but that has also translated into huge savings for the county, because as a result of that, the county has saved $1.8 million in booking costs in processing those individuals. That's all. When you
That's a
add
lot of
up
money.
the costs, you're talking about over $2 million saved in just that time. So because we've had such a huge success, we approached a local representative, Ina Minjares, who is good enough to carry our flag and is going to go to the legislature proposing to expand those offenses to now what are called state jail felony offenses, drug offenses we're talking about. Again, it still gives the officer the discretion to have the decision to arrest those people. If he or she believes that person should be arrested, then they can do that. We can then decide whether or not to accept that case. But it gives the officer another tool in his tool belt. And so
Mhm.
that's what this expansion does. It proposes to potentially um, cite that individual for possession of controlled substances of a less than a gram amount. And if you can think of if you have a lot of people have packets of sweet and low at home.
Mhm.
If you look at a packet, that's about a gram. Uh,
Mhm.
think about and if you hit it, and you get down to there's not a whole bunch in that little packet that you put in
Mhm.
your drink. That's what we're talking about, is less than that, or yeah, under a gram or less than a gram is the amount that we're talking about. If the officer makes a decision, if that the proposed bill becomes law, then the officers have the discretion to cite that individual. There are other types of offenses, for example, prostitution. What I have seen over the 30 plus years is a lot of times the reason that and I'll say women because a large part of people the amount of people that are arrested for prostitution are women. Most of them have a drug problem. Most of them are addicted to drugs, so that's why they're turning tricks. That's why they're committing that crime. Or they're victims of human trafficking. And so a lot of times they are the people that are victimized. So it doesn't really do any good to convict those individuals and keep them from getting public housing, keep them from getting good jobs. If we can come up with alternative resources, again, using the resources that we have a different way. And so that's
Mhm.
what it's designed to do, is to look at those kinds of cases. And if the officer believes that it's appropriate to cite that person instead of arresting her, then they have the ability to do that. So we're hopeful that we can get the support in Austin, but we'll see. This is in its infancy, but we're very fortunate that we have a progressive thinking legislator in Representative Mijares, and hopefully she'll be able to successfully lead that charge for us in Austin.
Well, I know she's a passionate leader, and I think you picked a good person to lead the charge for us in Austin because she cares about our community and about what's going to be the actual best outcome for the each individual that's going through our system. So uh, I I like what this is doing in its infancy. I can only imagine what it's going to look like in its sophomore years and junior years as it moves along, because uh, this is what we need. Uh, Arresting someone for prostitution when the real underlying cancer is drugs and the drugs in our community and what it actually does to a person, how it literally just takes away their dignity and all they can think about because of how it affects the brain and the body is the need to get more of the substance. It's when you see that a person is willing to toss everything aside for this substance, there has an arrest is not going to change that. If a mother is willing to walk away from a child to get a substance, an arrest is not going to change that.
You're
So we
absolutely
have to
right.
do something different other than punitive. We have to do something that is going to rehabilitate people, or at least give them a chance in life, give them an opportunity to change. And I like that. I like the courts that the court system that we've created here. Like, to me, we should be showing that to every city of our size and greater and smaller, so that we can better serve the community and help people begin to change.
You're so right. And that's part of this whole movement of criminal justice reform is looking at better ways to handle these kinds of cases and to bring restorative justice where it's appropriate. And that's exactly the kind of individual that can benefit from
Mhm.
reform and give them an opportunity to turn their lives around and perhaps help them get out of that vicious cycle that they're in. So,
Because it does. What we've created here in San Antonio should be seen in other places. While we have our problems like everybody else. No, I'm not saying we're perfect. Uh, but undoubtedly this majority minority city is working diligently to bring the best possible opportunities to our community and to address our community's problems in the most thoughtful manner. And that's why I brought you on, Honorable Joe Gonzales. I
well,
love saying that because that is a true statement about you. Now, I wouldn't bring somebody else on that I didn't think was honorable and say that. But that's why I like bringing you on because I I think in terms of a district attorney and a forward thinking one, there's we could not have done better when we made the decision to elect you. And that's not me just because, well, I like you now. I didn't know you before. but but really because it's this kind of innovative thinking in the midst of, I mean, we've all been going through an unprecedented time, which I feel like everybody says, oh, it's unprecedented. It truly is an unprecedented time. We've never seen anything like what has happened with us as a country, as a world, health wise, as a country in terms of civil unrest, and as a country in terms of us having an insurrection. We've never seen a Confederate flag fly in in the people's house before. This is the first time we've ever seen that. An entire war was fought so that that would not happen. So to try and be the district attorney to try and and instill some sort of normalcy in our world here in San Antonio, I commend you because this is a difficult time to have to do all of that. And you've managed to come up with the Civil Rights Division. You've managed to deal with the fact that we haven't been able to try cases, but at the same time, working within the parameters of what we're having to do here and just maintaining some dignity while doing that. And keeping the peace while doing it. Like even when in San Antonio, when we had peaceful protests, they were peaceful protests. Our police officers and our sheriffs did great. They did a good job. They showed compassion and humanity towards the people that were hurting and dealing with some of the worst hurts that humans can deal with. So I think in terms of our majority minority city, we have the opportunity and the duty and the leadership, which is what you are. I'm pointing to you on my screen. This is the weirdness of COVID-19 that we're all on Zoom calls, but we have the leadership, which is there's an incredible juxtaposition when I look at Joe Gonzales as a leader and some of the other people that have that same title. I won't even name their names because they shouldn't be in the same category, but there's a big difference in how our city has fared through all of this. and what we've seen in other cities. And we've had unrest here. We've had situations with our police department here, but it did not result in the chaos that it did in other places, because we know uh, people don't distrust us in the same way. They don't distrust leadership in the same way that they do in other places. And that is because of character. That is because of your character.
Well,
That's
thank you
why.
for saying that. I'm honored that you would think that of our office, because I don't do this by myself. I will give credit to our administration and our committed employees who work really hard and trying to do the right thing.
Well, we have great people there. We have an excellent commissioners court. You know, they they always do what is best for the people that elected them. And I mean, it is evident they will argue to the ground over the things they believe in. And it's just, it is what this is supposed to be. It's how one is supposed to conduct a city and the business of taking care of the people, you know. And I just, I guess I'm pensive about all of that since we've been on lockdown since we've been dealing with the pandemic for the last 11 months, and just watching how that in the middle of, now we're at Black History Month, and I think to myself, I'm living this life. I'm everything that my grandparents wanted to be. That, like, all of their greatest dreams and hopes, you know, I get to walk down that path. And when I see you, I know that's how your family felt. And for us to be able to lead in various ways,
By the
I,
way,
there's hope.
could they have ever imagined having a black female as the first vice president of this country?
I know. Oh my gosh. When I saw that, it was probably one of the happiest moments. And my two little daughters were just dancing. I have an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old. They were like, yes. You know, they were so excited. I mean, it even in the midst of everything that's gone on, that speaks to who we are as Americans. That we're better than the loud voices that we are hearing. Just because they're loud doesn't mean that they're right. You know, just because they're loud, it doesn't mean that everybody agrees with them. So I just have to thank you for everything that you guys are doing, and the Civil Rights Division. I can already see that it's going to make a difference in how we reimagine uh, the relationship with the district attorney's office and the police, and how the relationship with the district attorney's office and the public will be reimagined. I'm looking forward to it.
Well,
And thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing what's happening in our city. Is there anything else that you want to share with our listeners?
well, no, I enjoy my time with you. I enjoy these chats. It's important that we let the public know that what we're doing. I would invite anybody to visit our websites. We now have several dashboards, by the way, that we've created, uh, where you can see the progress in our office. We have a site and release dashboard. We have one that covers domestic violence, and we've got one for the criminal trial division, and so we're trying to create as many as we can to again report to the public how we're doing. We're in the middle of preparing a midterm. My term is 4 years. I'm now 2 years into it. So hopefully sometime this month we will release a midterm report to the public. Again, it's
Oh,
kind
I
of
can't
my
wait to
progress report. So
midterm report after a year of a pandemic. That's
yeah, that's right. It's kind of like that. It's kind of like that one year the Spurs went to the playoffs. It's an asterisk next to the name.
like, well, I want to thank you for being here today and for sharing what's your new path. and all that you're doing to make change. You know, as we celebrate Black History Month, I think I couldn't think of a better way to open Black History Month than with having you on to talk about what's going on in the community in general, and how we're policing, and how we're relating to one another in terms of in this new normal, i.e., pandemic, but also with social uprisings and everything that's been happening in the nation. I just thought people might need the hope that Joe Gonzales always brings, and forward thinking. So you are welcome to come anytime. I always enjoy visiting with you, and I thank you for being such a wonderful public servant.
Well, thank you, and happy Black History Month to you, and
Thank
have a
you.
wonderful week.
You too. All right. And you've been listening to On the Record with Tiffany, and we will be back next week, and we'll be talking some more about Black history and our beautiful city and what's going on in San Antonio. Remember, we're more alike than we are different. And this is a time for us to embrace that and see what's the path forward. And we're going to take it together. And you've been listening to On the Record with Tiffany.